In the wake of the horror revival in the late 1950s, Hammer Studios and their working relationship with Universal Studios kept the ball rolling with more adaptations of Universal monsters, making them more bloodier, violent, sexier, and more complex. Their next project? The Curse of the Werewolf is based on Guy Endor's novel, The Werewolf of Paris, with the titular werewolf moved from Paris to Spain, with a then unknown Oliver Reed in the lead role. Terence Fisher would be directing at the helm, with Hammer producer Anthony Hines filling in as screenwriter under the pseudonym John Elder. Now I know what you guys are thinking. Terence Fisher, Oliver Reed, werewolf? How are you not excited for this? Well, let's talk about it. In today's video, we will look at why this werewolf movie failed to live up to the rest of Hammer Horror's greats. Why did it flop at the box office? And is it worth remembering? The Curse of the Werewolf is a gothic tale about good versus evil and the fate of one man's soul whose life is crafted from tragedy. In the center of Leon Corledo, played by the up-and-coming Oliver Reed, whose fate is determined for him at birth. The story is simple enough for most werewolf films, so why did it fail? One of the most glaring issues with this film is its first act. It is loaded with exposition and backstory. We are introduced to the beggar and the Marquise Sinestro as the origin of violence. Through the first act, we get more characters such as the mute servant girl, who in turn is also a victim to both men, and the mother of Leon. Then comes Don Alfredo Corledo and his housekeeper Teresa, as the surrogate parents to Leon. We are introduced to two things in this first act: those responsible for his curse, and the family who will learn to love the child despite his affliction. The lore of the werewolf is rooted in folklore and superstition, something that most modern horror movies have thrown by the wayside. We've abandoned a crucial part of the setup just to get the monster on screen. But who cares about the history when we all want is just blood and guts? I mean, I don't mind that from time to time, but I love to see the myths of those worlds play out too. This is unconventional from Hammer. If they were attempting to have this be the startup of another franchise, this isn't the story to launch with. A whole 40 minutes out of a 90-minute runtime is devoted to backstory. And I would be lying if I didn't say I was looking at my clock to see how far I was into this film, and still no sign of the lead. We're not following a singular person story though, like a traditional narrative. Instead, what we are getting is an assortment of characters who are just playing their part of exposition for over a third of the film. So why should we care about these characters? As I have mentioned already, Oliver Reed does not show up in this film until later, and immediately he's charming. Why not? He's Oliver Reed, the man who would go on to star in other films and would make himself an icon. He's given his first lead role, and he doesn't waste time getting us on his side. But with that said, the character of Leon isn't a complex or interesting character, like in other werewolf movies with the likes of Lawrence Talbot and The Wolfman, or David Kessler in An American Werewolf in London.
What was it?
He's just a friendly guy who we know as the audience is about to have his life turned completely upside down, but we don't get to know him as a person beyond the tragedy. So when watching this film, I feel somewhat sorry for him, but what I'm getting at is that Leon Corledo is not a character. He's more of a subject in this really weird experiment. In a matter of will he, won't he, given to his monstrous tendencies, that is what Leon Corledo is. He is a subject in an experiment and not a character in a story. Wrapping up some of the criticisms is the werewolf. Where is he? The film is called The Curse of the Werewolf. and we haven't really seen any werewolf action yet. The beggar in the cell looks sort of werewolf-like. He has elements of lycanthrope, qualities. And we can do the math that shows that how he was treated by the Marquise. And over the years of that abuse, he has devolved mentally and physically into a feral animal.
I have bad dreams every night now, Uncle.
I see.
Then there is the first signs of Leon's transformation as a child. That's all within the first act, ladies and gentlemen. And they're two separate scenes. We don't get a full werewolf transformation until the last 10 minutes of the movie. A 90-minute runtime with only 10 minutes of werewolf action. Come on, Hammer, give us some more. Now that I've gotten through some of the harsh criticisms of this film, let me tell you what I love and respect about it. Firstly, the werewolf costume and color. It does not restrict Oliver Reed's performance in the costume, and the man can play one hell of a werewolf. I wish we got more of this, and then those little tragic moments in between where he's realized the horror and damage he has done.
There's blood on my hands.
Side tangent here. In case if you haven't noticed, I adore Oliver Reed. If you haven't seen Burnt Offerings or The Devil, I encourage you to go watch these films. Some of the most amazing horror films starring Reed that touch on themes of family and religion. Now back to our video. The film's greatest risk was its first act, and while I mentioned previously the errors of that, upon a second viewing, I loved it. From my understanding, Terrence Fisher and Anthony Hines were trying to tell a tragic story that is layered in themes of generational violence and hate, and that creating a child in that environment will only breed a monster. If you take a child out of that setting and put them in a loving home, there is hope for the child. But then again, this is a tragedy and not a feel-good, happily ever after story. Most Gothic fiction usually has to demand some type of a sacrifice, something that the main character must give up in order to be freed from the horrors. My favorite character in this film is not Leon, but in fact his adopted father, Don Alfredo. Alfredo is the bridge between all the time jumps and is present throughout the majority of the film, playing the reluctant rescuer who becomes a father. If anything, this film is also his story and journey into fatherhood, and will do whatever is needed to protect his son. He reluctantly becomes the town's hero and has to spare his son's lifetime of suffering. Those last moments of the film are important, with Alfredo killing the monster and seeing his son weep. It kills Alfredo to do it, but at the end of the day, he knows Leon's at peace finally. Now, I don't know about you. That's a hero's journey. The character of Alfredo Corledo shares similar trademarks to other fathers in horror films. Claude Rains' Sir John Talbot is a father forced to spare his son the agony of his affliction in The Wolfman. I can't help but pick up elements of Gregory Peck's fatherly role in The Omen from this as well. I'm not saying that there's like a direct correlation to this, but just viewing the film through a modern day perspective, I see all the loving dads in horror cinema that at the end of the day have to do the impossible task for their children. Moving away from just looking at the movie from a subjective opinion, one of the things I've noticed in Curse of the Werewolf is that it's pretty tame in its depiction of violence and horror. There are more cutaways from the violence rather than showing it compared to the other Hammer horror films like Dracula and the Mummy. In Dennis Meekel's A History of Horror, The Rise and Fall of the House of Hammer, we get details on the battle between Hammer Studios and the British Board of Film Classification. When it comes to gore, sex, and violence in Hammer films, the BBFC were the biggest hurdle yet. After the release of Peeping Tom in 1960 and its controversial showing of sex and violence, again, nothing new coming from Hammer at this time, John Trevelyan of the BBFC refused to be bought or go easy on the studio and film, going so far as believe that Hammer Studios should not be making horror films. Before filming, Trevelyan returned the script to Anthony Hines with a letter singling out the strongest condemnations in the screenplay: the degradation of the beggar and the of the servant girl. I strongly urge you to read Meekel's book to learn all the fights and struggles Hammer had with the censorship board. With the limited release in June of 1961 here in America, it would sadly fall victim to two summer releases, The Parent Trap and The Guns of Navarone, to conquer the box office. Also, releasing a Gothic horror film at the beginning of summer seems like set up the failure. The Curse of the Werewolf has its faults, but overall, as a horror film, I find it to be a unique Gothic tale. While the film's title and marketing sells it to us as a monster movie, it's more than that. At the center of this tragedy is something more complex that I can't seem to crack. What did you think of Hammer's attempt to make their own Wolfman? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and I'll see you next time as we cover another Hammer adaptation of a Universal classic. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next time.